Hello and welcome to GuyLogicGaming. My name is Demko and this is The Evil Within 2. Obviously the sequel to The Evil Within, it is a survival horror game. Now The Evil Within was not met with the greatest of receptions among critics, but they have changed a couple of things up, gone a little bit open worldy on us, added a few new mechanics and introduced a few new ideas for The Evil Within 2, and it seems to be working because this is an interesting game to say the very least. Now with sequels, I always say you should probably play the first game, but in this case I'm gonna deviate from that because this is a infinitely better title than the first, and unless you are really gung-ho on getting all the references, you might as well skip the first one, in my opinion. Obviously, your mileage may vary. This is a big game with a lot of content in it, but before I dive into gameplay, I'd like to take a look at the options and walk you through some of the PC specific stuff. Options wise, the game is pretty chock full, and one of the first big ones you see is text and voice language, which is pretty straightforward. HUD display settings though add something very interesting. This allows you to show and hide a variety of icons, from the subtitles and action icons you have, all the way down to enemy alertness icons that display whether or not an enemy is about to find you, whether or not you see a life gauge, interaction icons, even markers for your destination where you should be going, and everything in between, such as collectibles or additional item information. A lot of stuff can be hidden if you so desire to get that more claustrophobic, more true to nature, more hardcore survival experience. I've mostly kept most of them on because I am not really that good or, well, interested in that kind of gameplay. But if you are, these options are exactly what you might want. Control-wise, the game has 3 presets, 2 for the controller and 1 for the keyboard. And it also has a couple of things like sprint, cover, and quick action buttons that you can configure to your heart's content. It also has full keyboard rebindings, which is really good. One complaint I do have regarding this is not so much the keyboard rebindings themselves, because they are, even on defaults, I have not changed any of them, pretty decent. It's that the game really hates explaining what the hell you should touch for what exact action. Now you can see the home and end buttons in the bottom and the R and Q buttons, and those appear sometimes. But by the time you figure out most of the interaction you need, you'll be a couple of minutes in and looking at the options menu, trying to decipher what the hell is going where. Not the end of the world, but I would have liked a little bit more of a tutorial in regards to the controls on a PC. Graphics wise, you do have full screen, windowed, and so on. Changing of primary monitor if you have a multi-monitor setup is always welcome. The game sets for VSync with the ability to set your FPS as you deem fit. Resolution support for everything under the sun as you expect, and a field of view slider that goes all the way up to 90. Now this is a third-person title mostly, so this is pretty damn good. You can also enable film grain, but that looks horrible in my opinion, so I've turned it off for myself, but again, your mileage may vary. The game also has a ton of performance metrics you can enable to see whether or not there's any bottlenecks with your gameplay. It doesn't have a benchmarking mode, but this is the next best thing, and since the release of Doom, it is very nice to see another game implement something as advanced as this. Pretty damn good. Now, the game also has a advanced option settings, which it says it can impact performance quite a bit more. And you can change these to your heart content. It basically has everything you might want, from shadow quality to SSAO to depth of field, and it even has explanations in the bottom on what most of these do. Pretty damn good. No real complaints whatsoever. If we head over to audio, you'll have all the volume sliders in the universe as well as dynamic range settings. I mean, this is a options menu about as good as it gets. This is solid. Performance wise, the game also runs damn smooth. Now I've had reports of people saying the game runs absolute garbage on their system, and this can happen on occasion, but as far as I can tell, the game has never dipped below 60 in any situation, even when I was doing very weird stuff. That isn't to say there aren't any graphical issues or rendering issues with the game. I'll get into that in a second, but from a pure FPS and stuttering and smoothness perspective, the game runs absolutely fine. So what I will do is I'll dive into a save file I have, which is about an hour into the game, and show you a little bit of the open world while avoiding as many spoilers as possible. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, an important thing to remember for The Evil Within is not so much even that it's a third-person survival horror game. The biggest change to Evil Within 2 is a change to a much more open-world type of experience, with safe houses and free roaming and all that good stuff. Now, it isn't a true open-world game in the traditional sense like you might have in GTA 5 or something similar. It is still very much on rails, and that does show through the cracks. I personally really enjoy this change to the open world environment. Whether or not you're exploring a little dingy house on the corner of a town, whether or not you're running around trying to figure out what the hell is going on, if you're trying to go around a trash mob or trying to do a side objective or just get some extra resources for your weapons crafting. In all regards, I feel the open world is a much smoother and nicer experience than the previous title was. But it doesn't mean it's perfect, far from it. And the game feels a little bit schizophrenic when it tries to dip and dive between the two various ideas it tries to promote. Free roaming open world, find your own pathway experiences, coupled with the very narrative driven, very hand-holdy type of gameplay experience the rest of the game encompasses. And that is a little bit of a shame on one end, because while the game introduces you to the open world initially, as you dive into the game it sort of opens up the map quite a bit when you get into about an hour into the game. It suddenly has this entire town in front of you where you can move around and explore different buildings and everything related to that and find secrets and etc, etc. And then suddenly it switches into a tunnel complex where your only way forward is, well, forward. And the only action is, well, the one highlighted with a little white circle. And that isn't as nice an experience. Either one would have been fine, but trying to mumble and jumble these two together is often a jarring experience because you lose the flavor and the feeling of that overworld when you're in different areas, which where the game also tries to translate itself into more of a free roam experience. It never really knows what it tries to accomplish. Is it trying for you to be stealthy? Does it want you to run and gun around shooting zombies in the head? Does it want you to avoid attacking enemies or be conservative with your resources? Does it want you to think ahead and plan actions ahead, or does it want you to just run in and stab things in the face with your knife, sword, mallet, machete, whatever hell you might want to use? It never really seems to be sure of itself, segment to segment. The initial area is a very corridor-driven, very step-by-step cinematic experience, and it really shows. It's really excellent as an introduction to the title. And then it opens up in the area I'm showing you here as gameplay, and you have an open area that really lets you do whatever you want, interspace with minor quests and side objectives and everything in between. Truly excellent gameplay. It feels tight, it creates a lot of tension, you're walking around, you're crouching around corners because every turn you take could be an opponent. Very good. But then it tries to move you into the next segment and suddenly you get a big ass monster just spawning in front of you, and now you have a white corridor you have to run like your Harry Potter from the shitty first game they released with that damn troll. And you suddenly lose all forms of tension because, well, it's a scripted event. It doesn't really create any tension because you know when you hit that quick time event, that's the win. And if you don't hit it, well, try again. It isn't as immersive as the overall free roaming, exploring, hiding, running experience, and that is a shame. That said, I'm not saying it's a bad experience. I'm just saying it could be better because holy hell is The Evil Within 2 an enjoyable gameplay experience from start to finish. From the open world side of things, it creates large amounts of tension and free emergent gameplay. You're sneaking around trying to find out where you can find a quest, or maybe you're looking for new objectives, maybe you're just hunting zombies to get upgrade points so you can level up your character. Each step of the way, you're looking into this world and you're killing zombies and these various different creatures with inventive new ways. Maybe you're trying a lightning harpoon in a puddle of water to freeze all of them up and then stomping on the heads to smash their brains in. Maybe you're just walking around sneaking behind them. Maybe you put some points into sneaking and stabbing them in the back with a knife. Or maybe you're just like me and you run and gun around just shooting things in the head. Every gameplay style has its own place, and every step of the way the game does reward you for being inventive, exploratory, and just looking into weird places, and that is excellent. And moving into the more controlled and corridory areas, the game is very good at driving up that tension. Whereas in the open world, on occasion you will feel like you're the god in control because you just killed 5 zombies in one go, just because you got lucky with a weapon or a drop or something similar. But on the other end, in these single, more driven areas of the corridor, especially later down the line, in later chapters of the game, where you don't have that free roam experience as much as you do in the initial stages, a lot of the tension is raised because you don't know what the game is planning for you. It takes you in twists and turns you couldn't expect and really can't plan for because, well, it's a more controlled and more driven experience than the overworld where the game doesn't have control, whether you're not, you just circled around and stab things from the back that way. And the game does try to intermingle these two areas between open world and more controlled corridory experiences. But it doesn't always succeed in my opinion, and that does drag the experience down a little bit from nearly damn excellent and perfect to just really good. Now, moving away from that, we do have to talk about visuals and the overall immersive experience, because this is, again, a little bit of a misstep. Now, by no means does this look like a bad game. Far from it. The visuals are clean, crisp, and over the entire experience, I never felt like I wasn't sure what I was looking at or what I was looking for. The game isn't ambiguous. The game doesn't try to obfuscate things from you in any real way. It just wants you to have a good, solid experience, and well, it does exactly that. There's no ambiguity. If there's an enemy nearby, you will hear them or you will see them moving around. If something is dark, it is dark. If it is lighted, it is lighted. There is never any annoyances with foliage or anything similar. Overall, a very good, solid aesthetic, but it doesn't look like something that came out in late 2017, and that is because it is the same engine from the previous title about 3 years ago. And from a visual perspective, you really do feel like things like grass, shadows, and things like anisotrophic filtering really do suffer for it. It doesn't look bad, but neither does it look amazing. In other games, in other genres, and other games even in this genre today look better even on a console, and we're here sitting on a PC with a 1080 Ti on max settings, and it just doesn't compare to some other titles, which is definitely a bit of a shame, especially for a full price AAA experience. Again, not bad, but also not top of the line. And this seems to be something that the Evil Within 2 is struggling with every step of the way. For every 2 steps forward, it takes like half a step backwards. It looks visually very nice, very cohesive, very clean. Everything is obviously well put together. And then it adds like janky movement animation for your main character. It just doesn't always mesh well together from between what the game wants to be on one end, what the game tries to flow into from the previous title, and what is actually presented to the end player. Now, talking about that movement and interaction, this is my biggest annoyance with the game overall. Your main character moves like somebody shoved a brick rock up his ass. It's stiff, it's clunky, even running around and attacking with an axe always feels very annoying. I've never felt like I was attacking an enemy and I felt a heavy impact of an axe stuck into their skull. Even these sort of quick cutscenes when you try to backstab an enemy don't really feel like there's any weight behind your stabs. Sure, you see your knife go into them and you just flip them over, but never do I really feel like I'm attacking an enemy going with, oh yeah, there's weight behind this. These are creatures that could rip my head off if they tried. No, I just stabbed him in the head with a knife. Well, wonderful. That said, many of the animations for the monsters, many animations for the bosses are truly excellent. There are several bosses in the game that flow with some amazing otherworldly movement that isn't human at all, but neither is it just a skeleton tacked on a monster with a chainsaw. A creature made of multiple components and out of multiple creatures feels that way, and that is a distinction I really like. So again, 2 steps forward, half a step back. Main character has shitty animations, the rest has really good ones. As for control and combat interaction, again, not perfect, especially certain times when you're using the melee attacks, trying to aim at a target, or trying to run away or run around a corner in a sprint. Your main character feels a little bit clunky, and this isn't always as fun, especially in a tense situation where you're just trying to get that fine-tuned control to shoot your pistol in a monster's head, and suddenly you feel like if you press that sprint button, everything will go all over the place all the time. And as I said, the world detail and world building doesn't really help in this regard, and the main reason for that is the pretty over-the-top pop-in that is in the game. You may have already seen it in the video, but even on shorter distances, there is a lot of pop-in of creatures that just sort of shovel into view, crates and boxes that pop up halfway out across your screen. It isn't as bad as Watch Dogs was, but again, pop-in is never good, and there's really no reason for it to happen, especially in a game using an engine and mostly the same visual fidelity as its predecessor from 3 years ago. Now, moving away from that, we do have to talk about the horror aspect of the game and the survival aspect of it. As I said, the overall world and immersion is a bit of a schizophrenic duality, but that doesn't mean it's bad. As I said, the survival aspect of the game is truly enjoyable. You're scavenging around for resources everywhere, and especially in the early open world areas, you really feel like you have to scavenge around, moving around between buildings, gathering every little bit of resource you can find, and remembering by the ones you left off. Even going so far as to digging into trash, breaking into cars, looking under cars, going on top of buildings, and, well, munching on some brain matter if you really need to get resources to upgrade your weapons, to forge new ammunition, to get new health kits, and so on and so forth. And this is again a bit of a duality. On one end, the crafting system is truly enjoyable. You just gather raw resources in the world, from builds to ammunition to gunpowder, crowbars and whatnot, to make a variety of different bits and pieces for yourself to use. And normally you go to a workbench in a safe house or in a secluded area, and you can craft those things to carry on with you. Now, normally this would result in a lot of tension. You're always balancing the different resources you have available to what you have in terms of bullets or weapons, and then you balance that in how much you might need down the line to keep on going. You don't want to waste them because you have no idea if you're going to have enough resources down the line. And especially in later levels, when you're more in that directed and more corridory experience, at that point you really do get to an experience where you're really balancing out whether or not you want to shoot that one lightning bolt you have to stun an enemy for this one, or you want to keep it for a while longer because you're unsure whether or not you get to a safe place and you can craft some more later down the line. That said, this is where my biggest issue with a crafting system comes from, and that is the inclusion of a combat crafting mechanic. Just press your middle mouse button and suddenly a new crafting menu pops up. Now, while the field crafting mechanic is more expensive than crafting at the workbench, it is still available. So if you suddenly find yourself in a boss fight without any stun launcher rocket harpoons, well, just craft one. You probably have the resources around, so it removes a lot of the overall tension in the game that you would have been building up in a survival horror experience, which I think really isn't the best overall experience. Again, it's not the end of the world, and overall still very good, but for every step the game takes forward, it takes a little one back. And that is what I feel with nearly every aspect of this game. If you move over to the voice acting and overall story progression of the title, it is again very, very good, but not nearly as good as it could be, with some glaring flaws on locations. While the main character sounds okay, especially in the early stages when he's that slurry drunk he's pretending to be, you really feel connected to the character. There's some actual emotion involved. But later down the line, some of the side characters and other NPCs that aren't the main character really do not sound as, well, interesting. Not only do they not sound interesting from a visual voice perspective, but the overall body language the character animations have, as well as the dialogue out of voice actors, just sounds flat and bored. It's like a voice actor was sat down and said, well, pretend you don't give a shit while recording this, and they did. Now, I'm sure the voice actors did a tremendously good job, and from an overall quality and deliverance standpoint, the voice acting is on point. But from the intonations and from the way the characters feel involved in what they're doing and what they're saying, it really feels flat. It's really strange to hear two gun-ho mercenaries talking about how they're very scared for their lives with about as much intonation as you would by ordering your morning coffee at Starbucks. It just doesn't feel that great. And again, the delivery is perfect, it just really doesn't always fit as it should for some of the side characters. For the main characters though, voice acting, animations, overall intonation, and overall delivery is on point. And this is really important because at the end of the day, even with the open world elements, the game is heavily driven by story and narrative experiences. So for the Evil Within 2, every part of the game, even the shitty throwaway side quests you might expect in any open world game, are still very involved in terms of what they offer and how they offer it. And again, that is also where the biggest strength of the game lies. Creating that horror experience, creating that really engaging, deep survival horror experience where you're just looking around over your shoulder every single time you turn around a corner is truly enjoyable. And that the game has down to a T, whether or not that's the open world or the corridory, more controlled areas. Having said all of this, there is one last thing to touch on in regards to the Evil Within 2. And that's really whether or not the game is scary. Are you really surviving? And the answer, again, very predictably, is that it's, well, sort of. Because the game keeps on with its 2 steps forward, half a step back, tried and true formula, initially you really feel like you're scavenging and surviving. But later down the line, once less and less of the world is open and it becomes more and more of a gated experience in terms of what you're expected to do, you don't feel so much as you're surviving as much as you're just running around shooting enemies. I initially started off by being really conservative on my ammo, being very careful on not attracting attention, being very careful that I'm not doing anything that might draw any enemies in, just trying to sneak around them, trying to stab them in the back to clear them out a little bit, trying to get to resources, and then 4 or 5 hours later, I was walking around shooting 3 enemies at the same time while backing off away from them, not really even worried if they hit me because I had enough health potions to last me a lifetime. lifetime. Now you could obviously resolve this by playing the game on the highest difficulty. I'm playing it on normal difficulty, and maybe on nightmare difficulty this would be resolved. You're gonna have to be much more careful and much more slow and methodical, but it doesn't solve the fundamental issue what the game's duality keeps on providing. On one end, the game has a lot to offer in terms of depth, in terms of survival experience, and in overall terms of how it tries to accomplish what it tries to do, get you to feel immersed in a very cool horror experience. But on the other hand, in their journey to let go and let you explore for yourself and find out things, they've also inadvertently stumbled upon you being able to outlevel the content you're playing with. They have let you feel like sort of a little bit of a modern zombie Rambo, because you can go around the starter area and the later stages just killing all these zombies left and right without really having ever to worry about things. Now granted, there are on occasion mobs and bosses and areas in between that will absolutely curb stomp the hell out of you with no warning if you're not careful. So those do keep you on your toes, but they are mostly further down the game and really a little bit too far in between for my own tastes. Even the variety of off-screen and off-the-beaten-path locations with like hidden secrets and everything in between don't always convey everything to the proper manner you might expect or want. There's a very particular moment when I was looking around in a train cart and I found an extra pouch to hold more bullets, which triggered the trap behind me. There was no way for me to get out of this trap any way except to trigger it, which was a little bit of a shame. And the game does have a tendency of putting you in linear situations just to have trick you into experiencing something it demands you experience without letting you solve them in any other way. While Trill's trying to tell you, no, you're an open world, you can do whatever you want. Ah yes, but this is a experience you're gonna have to be linear about, and I'm not letting you deviate it in any singular way. That duality is always a little bit of a jarring shame. On the other hand though, we do have a fantastically enjoyable, open-ish survival horror experience that at the end of the day, truly an enjoyable bit of video gaming. The Evil Within 2 is overall a solid experience, and I do truly recommend it if you enjoy horror games. If you don't enjoy horror games, this game might still offer bits and pieces for you because it isn't as scary as I would have expected to be. It's more about the experience of trying to survive and figure out a pathway to the end of the game. Now, if you're really not into scary, survival, psychedelic horror experiences, this really might not be the game for you. So what to do is overall a really solid survival horror experience that is a lot more open than its predecessor, and in many ways a massive improvement. Sadly, visuals really aren't one of them. The Evil Within 2 is available over on Steam for $60 or your regional equivalent and has about 20 hours of content available. No microtransactions and no day one DLC, which I'm really surprised I really have to mention as something that is a good thing instead of the norm, but well, that's video games for you. The Evil Within 2. Check it out with a link down below. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, press that like button. Didn't like this video, there's a dislike button for exactly that purpose. And if you want to see more content like this on the channel, just press that subscribe button down below and we will deliver. And if you want to support GuyLogicGaming as we go forward in the future, you can check us out on Patreon. There's a link for that in the description down below. So I wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogicGaming.